So obviously that's another bag of worms because there are lots of churches that really like to use Bethel's music, um, and part of it is like there's nothing wrong with like the music per se, but there are concepts in there that do strike me as maybe more concerning for the average church service. And the fact that when we're reading some of the lyrics, after we looked at um, their mission statement and how heavy focus they are on the supernatural ministry side of things, you have to know that when they're singing out these lyrics, it's not necessarily meaning the same thing to us as it would be to them, at least at an emotional level. Would you guys agree to that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would agree with that.
Hesitantly.
Well, yeah, yeah. I was just bringing in some of their lyrics right now because I know theologically I have issue with a lot of their lyrics.
Yeah, and they got a lot of songs up there, so I'm sure there's issue with quite a few of them. My my biggest beef that I have with the way that they're, at least commonly how their music um, is that they set up this sense of, and this is more just observational compared to other kinds of music that you see in uh, we'll say cultic practices, but it's not super uncommon either in just general American culture at the moment. There is this trend within religions that have a focus toward the transcendent in like an Eastern sense,
Mm.
where they're looking to have a meditative, otherworldly sort of experience. The two ways that, at least in my opinion, that you see that take place musically is either it's very chaotic and there's lots of drumming involved, there's lots of movement involved, and it's overwhelming and overstimulating. The other way that people achieve this same effect is by making it really drawn out. So imagine like your Buddhist bells, your chanting of like a group of monks chanting around and humming out a single note. They're trying to connect to the other world by sustaining something for a very long time. So when I listen to Bethel's music, and again, I'm not saying that there's necessarily something wrong with like the number of notes they're using or anything like that, but because this is kind of a thing that they're into in terms of like they're stretching toward this other world in a sense that seems I don't see merit for it in a biblical sense in the way that they're reaching out toward it. The combination between the two seems more concerning to me because while they are using motions in their chords and they're using interesting complex melodies, there is this interesting kind of let's say tonal hum. Like it has a certain um, not stretchiness, but there is this kind of meditative, um, transcendent quality to the music that's highly emotional. Um, which again, none of these things are bad, but just that combination again is what was driving the concern for me. Does that make sense?
Yes. Can I ask you just to really get into what you're saying real
Yeah.
quickly, and it's going to probably as well help viewers and myself and Ethan. I mean, you're saying some really great stuff here. What I was thinking is, and this is going back to some of our conversations we've had some time ago, as you were talking about the stuff, is you mentioned the bell, the gong, like the gong, and the drawn out sounds. Also, the repetitive nature of the
Mm-hmm.
beats. But one thing I've noticed is you'll even find this you go to a local bar in the evening. They tend to play music that does have this constant boom, 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 and then
Mm-hmm.
the music is very redundant in the lyrics. That's common across culture in general right now in terms of the music culture. That's
Yep.
pop and what's you know popular. And so you're seeing that as well within these with Bethel as well. They're doing this drawn out, repetitive, and then with that, and this is what I want to get at, is the lack of lyrics. And so would you say when you couple that type of a bass tone and the way in which they're building the themes and the music in a redundant, drawn out way with the lack of content, it actually does stimulate emotion without mental faculty. And so what you have is it really is a service to the physiological and even the soul's desires responding to that, without the knowledge of the Lord being really invested into the music. And so I guess this is where I want to kind of get you to reflect real quickly before we run out of time is would you say there is definitely what it is? It's the music along with the way in which they're doing the lyrics that promotes a more mindless exercise that draws you into your senses. And so that's my question.
Yeah,
Or
I
my
think
thoughts.
I think a lot of these things can be issues in themselves. I don't know if I could point to something and be like this is wrong particularly, but again, like you're saying, like
Well, in the
concerning
context
factors in the context, yeah.
In the context of Christian worship, I think it would be okay to say that if you're singing hymns and songs without much hymn or song, in terms of what,
Right.
because Paul has in mind lyrics.
Yeah. So, there are.
I'm trying to corner you.
No, that's good. I think the reason I hesitate because I know that there are songs that we sing that we love that are simple and they're repetitive. There's not a whole lot to we sing them with a lot of emotion and love. Like "Give Me Jesus." There's not a whole lot to that song, but I would sing that happily in a church service. But the larger context is that you would have other songs that and content that uphold that particular song. So again, I personally I wouldn't use.
So it's not the piece in itself, but it's the constants, the fact that all the music's that way.
Well, it is the piece in itself too, but it's not just because of that.
Right.
Yeah, so I would say that the bigger reason that I have skepticism toward types of music like this in a church service in particular, if you want to go to a concert, that's one thing, but for the purposes of a church service or a worship service where we are called to sing to one another, and the fact that the music is so I'm trying to be gentle in my words, but I think
you're being too gentle.
Yeah, it's written in an egocentric type of way, where it is uplifting the performer, and it's focused on the emotional of the emotional capacities of the listener, without getting them to participate in a cognitive sort of way. And not that emotions are bad, but it does kind of strip that aspect out of them. So what I want from the music itself is that there would be lyrical depth that is trying to get across a particular doctrine without being too emotional. Now, again, not that those things are bad in themselves, but when you strip them from the
proper
context,
emotion,
right? When you strip them from the context of a larger service, that I think that's wrong. If the music tends to be more, I'll say ooey aye, there's a lot of stretchiness to it that induces that kind of transcendent sort of feeling, then I would be wary of that in a religious context, especially if it's removed from the more rigorous type of thinking that I think needs to be activated in the communal singing. And I think communal singing needs to be a larger part of that conversation, because we're called to sing together in a Christian context, to sing to one another in a Christian context, not just to have a soloist. And there is something being said when you have, and this is for a lot of churches, but there is something being said about the elevation of a particular musician when they're on a stage and they're singing in a microphone and the speakers are blaring. Rather, I think the better context would be for all of us to be singing together and making a sound together. Not that there isn't precedence to have soloists every once in a while, or in different events, different settings, and that we can enjoy that as Christians. But there is something important to protect about a Christian service. And like you said, the repetitive nature of their of the kind of music that they are promoting is also concerning. And again, if you don't have uh, if it's not rooted in deep biblical doctrine, again, I think separated from the way that they state things in their doctrinal statement, then you have further issues. We got about a minute left, so I was kind of hurrying through that.
Okay, so yeah, what you're seeing is they're qualitative issues, not quantitative. So it's just they have issues that are to degrees in which, and the way in which they're doing them is where it becomes concerning. It's not that it's the things in itself, but it's all these things together in the way in which it's carried out.
Yeah.
It becomes, like you said, it incites a way of doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still thinking through and processing this. This is a great topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's much more we could say about it.
All right, so we're continuing our conversation on the music of Bethel. So we were talking about just during the break, during a song called "In Over My Head," and so we had the lyrics up. Ethan, do you want to read and talk about the lyrics a little bit?
Right on. I don't know if I want to start at the beginning or just some of the parts, because basically the whole thing. Well, I guess we can start at the top. So I've come to this place in my life. I'm full, but I'm not satisfied. This longing to have more of you. I can feel in my heart is convinced. I'm thirsty. My soul can't be quenched. You already know this, but still, come and do whatever you want. I'm standing knee deep, but I'm out where I've never been. I feel you coming, and I hear your voice in the wind. Would you come and tear down the boxes that I've tried to put you in? Let love come teach me who you are again. Take me back to the place where my heart is only about you. I mean, I guess right out of the box, like, how do we know this is talking about God?
And
I guess that was my first question.
yeah, and let's remember that love means something to them,
Yeah, love means something
right?
to them.
So
Yeah, exactly.
love is contextualized in a supernatural understanding of how God works. But yeah, there's not a whole lot being said here. It just kind of
Satisfied, but not satisfied, and we were just talking about that. How Christ Christ's work in us does satisfy us.
Yeah.
It does quench
Yeah,
our hunger and our thirst.
and I think that's the thing is they got the dichotomy that, if we want to use that word, the dialectic. I use some Hegel there. Actually, it's not Hegel. I mean, it's just, well, yes, it's him. I'll give it to him. The dialectic of being satisfied and wanting more of the Lord. It seems they got the cart before the horse. It's like there is no sense of satisfaction. There's no satisfaction in their understanding of Christ except in their life being out of control and desiring more is like but for the biblically speaking, it's very clear that we have tasted of Christ, and we have been, all our needs and desires have been met. That's Paul, Philippians 3. That's his testimony. It's the Christian testimony, and yet in that being satisfied, we desire more of Christ because of the fact that he's the one who satisfies, and he does that in every day. And I think that goes back in why is it a constant experience that we want to be satisfied or desire more of God? Because he is the one for whom we were made for, and that is to be present with us in every moment. It goes to Augustine, that wonderful phrase, as you guys know, my heart is restless until it has found rest in thee or in you. That's missing absolutely in that type of language.
Yeah, completely. There's not a whole lot to say about. I'm just looking at the chord chart here. We can't play the music on the webs just because we'll get flagged. And so you can go listen to the song, and I'm not sure exactly what style this is played in, but a lot of their songs do have that kind of drawn out sort of sound, that tone that is pervasive through the piece. So, but in terms of the chording, I do find it interesting, and this isn't again super uncommon with like pop groups and stuff like that. Um, there is a trend eh, that seems to me to be popular to invert the regular chord progressions that were developed in the classical music era, using era pretty broadly. And again, not that the old European style of chording and harmony was divinely inspired or anything like that. Um, but there was a certain logic to it. So when you had for those of you that know something about music theory, when we're talking about chords, it's a grouping of three notes or maybe more, sometimes less if you want to talk about uh, smaller chunks of harmony. But typically chords are talking about three notes or more. And in the way that classical music used to do it was to make the chord progression really obvious. So, for instance, if I was moving from a C chord to an E minor, that would normally not be a good move just because it's a weak chord progression because you're basically doubling up on two notes. So a C major is built by a C, E, and G, and E minor is built by E, G, and B. And so it doesn't actually sound like when you're moving upward, it doesn't sound like you're making an actual chord change, but it tends to sound or can sound like a chord expansion. Because when you want to build a C major 7, you just put those two chords together. So it doesn't sound like you're going anywhere. So typically if they wanted to move in a third, which that's what that is a major third, C to E, they would move down a third from C to A minor. So again, this is me bringing back a lot of memory from my early music theory classes.
This is good. Keep it going.
So when it's popular, either way, even if you do find instances of that in earlier classical music, again that kind of chord progression is a weak chord progression. So the way that seems to me is that they want to have these interesting moments where they are not making a lot of changes between chord 1 and chord 2. So I'm seeing movements that are typically seen as weak progressions, and again, I use these for a lot of like my popular stuff or my art stuff, and I would even use these in a worship context. But again, all these things together, we're making a cumulative case, I suppose an apologetic or a polemic against their music. Um, these kind of chord progressions, like in the pre-chorus, they move. The first movement is down a second, then up a fifth, and then what is that? Down a fourth. All those movements are opposite to what you would have in classical music because those are weaker progressions. Normally, it'd be up a second, and then up a fourth, down a fifth, that sort of motion. So that's again inverted of what you would have classically. So again, not to say, I try to keep emphasizing this. It's
So
not that these things are bad in themselves, but there is a function to using things in a weak sense.
yes, I think that makes a good point. Again, this is qualitatively when you look at all this together, and in the way in which they're doing it, it
Hmm.
becomes the problem. Where you add that on top of that is the lyrics.
Yep.
With
So
what you gave a very good presentation in terms of the data on the actual instrumental side, which again, like you noted, is common in the music in church and outside the church, which is it really says that it's the church's way of trying to relate with the contemporary world's form of music. I mean, you look at you get into music of the late 20th century and into present. It's all doing this type of real what'd you call it, weak change, chord change.
yeah, a
and
weak
and,
chord
and
progression.
yeah, and so when you have that on top of lyrics that are very what one might call lyrically weak, or in terms of definition and context. You're actually following the words or following that humdrum of the chord changes. So it's almost like everything has become weak. And that, again, is where it goes back to that point of it's stimulating just these sensual aspect of our humanity, and not also bringing with it our intellectual, our thoughtfulness, and allowing our thoughtfulness to engage our emotions in a way that would bring our emotions into a proper context. I think without the mind and the Word of God, that is really detached from this music. It actually becomes more of a representation of our fallenness in Adam, where we just want to experience and to feel and to actually have the control on how we experience and how we feel. But in Christ's lordship, if His Word is actually being the thing that's engaging our emotions, what's funny is that, again, that dialectic is that's actually when we become more satisfied, when we're not in control of our emotion, when we allow Christ's Word to control our emotions rather than just being thoughtless and allowing it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Cool. Let's listen to a moment of the music, so that way we don't hopefully get flagged, but we can kind of
I like
see.
the background.
I know. See if our diagnosis is correct.
And I can feel in my heart is convinced I'm thirsty, my soul can't be quenched.
So again, it's a highly emotional setting. They and for those of you that can't see, they're playing the song in like a lake, like above a lake in the mountains, and it looks very pretty. So again, nothing.
And it's getting into the evening hours. The sun is going down.
Yeah, it's highly pretty, highly emotional setting. Let's skip a little bit forward and see what it sounds like over here. I meant to skip forward to the next part of the song, and I did, and it sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
It was just to be with you. Come do.
So listen to the there's some higher pitched instrumentation that is pretty static. So you're taking some notes and you're just really stretching those out.
Whatever you want to. And further, my heart
You see what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So even through the sections, there is this pedal tone higher up that just kind of is tying the whole thing together. That I mean, it's a good technique when you're building music to get a certain effect. But again, we're talking about a religious context, and they want to elicit a certain religious experience. This is, I think, a good way of manipulating that sort of feeling. And is a good way to encourage people to be more internalized into that experience. I'd imagine the same effect, though I think this achieves it better emotionally, if you're talking about practices like yoga or Eastern meditation practices. I think it's why you get the bells, you get the gongs. You get the hums,
and that's the whole point of their even their philosophy is to take the mind out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want it to be attached to any particular, and yet that type of formality that does actually really contra the reverse, the opposite of what you would find in Christian, what we're called to in Scripture, which is to proclaim the word of the Lord in our hymns and our songs, to actually bring our minds to for a figurative word, attached to this world in a way that's redeeming, to see all the particularities of the world and see God's hand in how He's made each and everything a certain way, etc. It's not to escape, but that you're right. It fits the Eastern worldview more than it does a biblical worldview. Is
Right.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there's just a little bit more, and then we'll finish it off.
Yeah, I got to hear this build.
Whatever it looks like, whatever may come, I'm yours.
Same with the use of reverb. Sorry, I'm stopping it like I am to make sure that we're not getting flagged like that. But again, the use of reverb is doing the exact same thing. It's accentuating the harmonics. So every instrument has this harmonic spectrum above where it actually, like, you hear this tone down here, but there's this harmonic spectrum of notes that you don't typically hear that affect the way that a instrument sounds, and that's accentuated by reverb and delay.
And further, my heart moves away from the shore. Whatever it looks like, whatever may come, I'm yours. And you crash over me.
Like, it's a very effective build. Like, they put this together very well, and I admire their ability to put on a good show and to be emotional like that. But it does seem manipulative to me in a religious context, in a Christian context.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like they do a really good job of taking an idea of a melody, like a few notes, and then they raise it up a degree and then raise it up a degree, so you have that cascading effect of a build that's super common. What I find, just kind of as a side note, interesting, there's a common use of the pentatonic, the major pentatonic scale in this kind of music that's very flexible. Again, not that they're doing that completely, but the pentatonic music is, or pentatonic scale is sometimes known as the Chinese scale. And again, so we're talking about religious uses and stuff like that. There is this kind of ooey awey type of feeling that Eastern music tends to give, and I think this is pulling some qualities from that. Though again, that's super common just in regular Western music today. So it's not like they probably weren't studying Eastern music or anything like that to get to that point. But and that's why guitarists learn the pentatonic scale, because it's extremely flexible and there's not a lot of tension in it. So if you're looking for music that doesn't surprise you harmonically, but it just gives you this like non-dissonant sort of feeling, the pentatonic scale is great. So anyway, I'll stop that there.
Yeah. But there's also a sense in which, I mean, it does take a lot of work to music in general. It takes time to become sufficient at an instrument. It becomes, and then to put a band together and to get the words together and then the build. But at the same time, and I'm no grand musician myself, but I do play a little bit, and I was raised, as you guys know, in this background of the contemporary evangelical Christian music, and we all were, well, except for Ethan. Ethan heard it on his radio on top of a mountain. Yeah. And I'm thinking it actually, on another level, once you understand basic chord progression and the basics, is actually pretty easy for a musician to develop this kind of music. In fact, it goes to your point later. I mean, a lot of that skillful craftsmanship of music does seem to be the thing for me. This is not much of a critique toward them as much as just our generation in music. It seems to be that what would be beautiful to see is a church actually put together a real skillful, and you got the words for it, Jake, where they're doing a lot more, they're putting a lot more thought and method in the way in which they're musically building, but also keeping it in a way that still has that deep emotional connection, and in keeping even a general ring to it. I mean, you can do that in a way that's not what we're hearing.
Yeah, this is just a personal thing, but I think preferably the majority of the music in a church would just be the congregation. Not that I'm opposed to
And
instrumentation.
a harp? Are you against maybe a harp?
No, man, I want a full blown organ, man. I just no,
Wait, David didn't have an organ, bro.
I know I know. Yeah, he definitely wasn't biblical.
He had a harpsichord.
Yeah, harpsichord. Instrumentation. I think that if there is a worship leader, they should be thinking about the musical health of their congregation, not for music in particular, but for the building up of the church. So I would rather see if a worship leader was talking about their worship team, think about their congregation first.
Mhm.
And
So-
there are actually a lot of bands out there that are doing this right
Mhm.
now, that are actually making really good music, that are actually congregational music. We could talk about those if we wanted to, but I wanted to read from John 4, when Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and the woman at the well brings up the concept of where should we worship, and she's still focused on the place of worship, where we should worship, and Jesus responds to her in something that should define our worship, how we approach worship. He says in 21, Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and truth.
Mhm.
For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth." And the thing is yes, we are worshiping in spirit, but the spirit, yeah, that's us together as a church, and truth is what is founded in Scripture. And if we're not singing words that reflect Scripture and the truth that is there, or reflect the Spirit, which is God, then we have missed the point. And I think this is what we've all been saying. We've missed the point, and we've fallen from what true worship is.
Yep. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us on X Garage. That was excellent. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you around next time. X Garage.
X Garage.